Arch, sorry, but you don't get to vote this time. You don't have to be sorry. It's no problem. I know I might not choose correctly, given my financial troubles. Money can make you blind. Honestly, I am just glad I am not getting kicked off the team. What are you talking about? We're lucky to have a caster with your skills. He wasn't just being polite. It was the truth. Especially with regards to the talent she'd been born with. Hecarim and the team had been saved by her miraculous eyes more than a few times. To give a name to Arch's special ability, perhaps it could be called magic detection eyes. Apparently, arcane casters had an invisible aura of magical energy surrounding them. Arch could see it and know what tiers of magic they could use. It was unnecessary to explain how useful it was to be able to gauge an opponent's power. As far as Hecarim and the others knew, there was only one other person in the Empire with that ability, the greatest, most powerful wizard in the country, Fluda Paradine. In other words, Arch was Fluda's equal, if only when talking about their eyes. I can't believe the Magic Academy let such an outstanding student get away. Truly. You're so young, yet you can use the same tier as me. You might make it to tier 6 someday. That seems hard, but if there were even a slight possibility, I'd be happy. When the atmosphere had relaxed somewhat, Hecarim clapped his hands together. The dry sound drew everyone's eyes. So are we going to take this job or not? Robodick, I am fine with it. Emina, why not? We haven't had a proper job in quite a while. Worker jobs didn't come along so often. Indeed, the previous week they'd been exterminating undead on the Katsi Plain, but they were simply paid for how many they killed. Taking on a job from a requester was a bit different. Then if you're worrying about me, please don't, even if we don't take this job, I'll find another way to make money. The three of them exchanged glances, and then Emina grinned. No way, it hadn't even crossed our minds. It's not a bad job, you know. We want that fat reward. Right, Robodick, that's right. We're not doing it for you, but for the many items sleeping in those undiscovered ruins. Isn't that so, Hecarim? Like the man said, Arch, although it's too bad we won't get famous as the ones to discover them. Thank you, everyone. Arch bobbed her head, and the others looked at one another and smiled. Okay, so Arch will come with me to cash the gold ticket. You two, start getting the stuff for our adventure ready. They couldn't slack on checking their magic items, making sure they had rope and oil, all the equipment they'd need for their trip. It was appropriate work for methodical Robodick and Emina with her thief skills. Or maybe Hecarim was just awful at it. Okay, let us get going, but Arch cocked her head as if to say, what? And Hecarim posed the question on his mind. You know, we won't make enough on this job to pay back your debts. It's okay. If I pay that much, I can get him to wait a little longer. We could lend you the rest. Emina chimed in, sure. You can just pay us back after the next job, added Robodick. They wouldn't just give it to her, that much was a given. The members of Foresight were equals. ILL pass. Really, my parents should be the ones paying it back, but ILL put in my time and do my filial duty. That makes sense. The four of them exchanged glances and then set about their respective tasks. 3 in 1 district of the imperial capital was a high-class residential district. It was lined with old yet sturdy, formerly gorgeous mansions on spacious plots. As one might expect, the masters of these historic yet by no means outmoded houses were mostly nobles. A noble's residence was a status symbol. One who didn't decorate their house because they felt it was a waste of money would be ridiculed. Furnishings, jewelry, clothing, and house, these elegantly ornamented items were the equivalent of military might on the battlefield of noble society. They accurately conveyed not only a noble's wealth, but also the breadth and depth of their social connections. Living in a shabby house was enough to be looked down upon. For that reason, unless they were of a military temperament and had little interest in politics, nobles decked out both themselves and their houses. It was like a demonstration of martial power. Only people with enough clout could make that demonstration. Looking around the area, a few things were apparent. The neighborhood was in a very safe part of the capital and was quiet, but the silence seemed to stem from something else. Many houses lacked any human presence. In fact, those houses had been abandoned by former nobles. They could no longer maintain them, having been stripped of their rank by the fresh-blood emperor. Amid the empty boxes were some houses that were still inhabited, but their outer walls had fallen into disrepair, and the pruning of the trees in the yard had been neglected. In the sitting room of one of those houses wearing a hard expression, Arch was welcomed by her parents. Their faces had the well-bred noble look. They wore well-tailored clothes. "Oh, welcome home, Arch, welcome back." Before replying to them, she shifted her gaze to the piece of glasswork on the table. It was an extremely elaborate sculpture shaped like a cup. It had the prim air peculiar to luxury items. Her brow twitched because she had never seen it before. "What is that?" "Ah, this is a piece by the artist Jean. That's not what I am asking. This wasn't here before. Why is it here now?" "Well, because we bought it this morning." Her father's remark, as casual as if he were discussing the weather, sent a wave of shock through Arch's body. "For how much?" "I believe it was 15 gold pieces. A steal, don't you think?" Arch's shoulders slumped. It was a natural reaction for anyone who had just used their advance to pay off part of a debt, only to return home and find that same debt had increased once more. "Why did you buy it?" Any noble would become a laughingstock if they didn't spend money on things like this. Arch couldn't help but give a hostile glare to her father with that proud look on his face. "We're not nobles anymore." At her words, his face hardened and flushed. "You're wrong," he thumped the table. Luckily, the sitting room table was thick. The glass cup didn't budge. Arch wouldn't have minded if it broke, but it probably wouldn't have even fazed her father. He would have just thought, well, it was only 15 gold pieces. While Arch suppressed her irritation, her father continued shouting, spittle flying from his lips. "Once that wretched fool dies, our family will resume our status as nobles. Our house has supported the empire for over 100 years. I will not forgive this interruption of our glorious history. This is an investment for the future. And by showing off our power like this, we can send a message to that villain that we won't give in." "Idiot." That was Arch's opinion of her excitable, arrogant father. That villain was surely the fresh-blood emperor, but he probably didn't care one bit about their family. Plus, shouldn't there have been a better way to get back at him? Her father was a prisoner of his own little world. He couldn't see outside. Arch shook her head weakly. "Would you two please stop fighting?" Her mother's leisurely tone triggered a temporary truce. She stood up and handed Arch a small bottle. "Arch, I bought you some perfume. How much was it?" 3 gold pieces. "Oh, thanks. That makes 18. She calculated the total in her head as she thanked her mother. She took the bottle, which barely contained any perfume, and put it away in a secure pocket. Arch had a hard time being cold to her mother, and from a certain perspective, things like perfume and makeup could be considered smart purchases. If she dressed up and attended the right party, a powerful noble might fall in love with her. Most nobles believed a woman's happiness came from marriage, pregnancy, and child rearing. Buying those sorts of things as an investment toward that end wasn't so wrong. Still, she didn't feel it was appropriate to spend money on perfume right now, considering the family's situation. An ordinary household could sustain itself for a month on 3 gold. I've told you a million times, but you shouldn't waste money. Only buy the minimum daily necessities. But I just told you. This is a necessity. Her father cast an exasperated look at her, his face splotchy with rage. He had this conversation many times. It always ended in a compromise. Arch partly blamed herself for things having gotten this bad. If she had made a power move earlier, this wouldn't have happened. She also wouldn't have caused trouble for her teammates in Foresight. "I am not contributing any more money to this household. I am taking my sisters and leaving." This quiet announcement made her father furious. His first thought was probably, "Then who will make the money?" She thought icily. "Who do you think has supported you up until now? I've repaid my debts to you," she declared. The money she had given them already was quite a sum. It was money made on adventures. It was supposed to go toward growing stronger with her friends. Of course, everyone was free to use their rewards how they liked, but there was a tacit understanding that a good part of the funds would go toward building up their strength. What had her friends thought of her, seeing that she never bought new gear? Not upgrading her equipment meant that one of the team's members was weaker than the others, but no one ever said anything to her about it. She'd taken advantage of their goodwill. Arch scowled fiercely. It was a gaze that conveyed her tenacious will. Her father averted his eyes like a coward. Of course he did. There was no way Arch, who had survived any number of life and death battles, could lose to a foolish noble. With a glance at her father, who had nothing more to say, Arch left the room. She closed the door behind her and sighed. Then a voice addressed her, as if it had been waiting for the chance. "Miss Jims, what is it?" Jim's was the family's longtime butler. His wrinkled face was taut with worry. She knew why immediately. She'd seen the expression several times since her father was stripped of his noble status. "It pains me to bring this sort of thing up with you, miss," but Arch interrupted him with a raised hand to indicate he needn't say any more. She had the feeling it wasn't a conversation they should have right outside the sitting room, so they moved a short distance away. Arch took a small leather pouch from her breast pocket and opened it. There were various gleams inside. Most of them were silver and then copper. Precious few were gold. Will this be enough somehow? When Jims took the pouch and examined its contents, his face softened slightly. "This should suffice for my salary and to repay the merchant." "Good." Arch sighed with relief that ends would somehow meet, even though the family was hovering near bankruptcy. "You couldn't stop him from shopping?" "No, the seller came with a noble he knows." "I did try a few times, but I see they both sighed. I wanted to ask you, if I were to let all the staff go, what is the minimum amount of money I would need to prepare?" Jim's eyes widened slightly, and then he smiled sadly. The fact that he wasn't shaken must have meant he'd been expecting it. "I'll make an approximate calculation and inform you later." "Thanks." Just then they heard the sound of scampering footsteps coming down the hall. Arch didn't have to look to know who it was. The corners of her mouth relaxed into a weak smile, and she turned around to see a single figure dashing toward her. It plowed straight into her without slowing. The one who leaped at her was a girl scarcely over 3 feet tall. She must have been about 5 years old. Her eyes looked very much like Arch as she puffed out her pink cheeks in disapproval. "You race so hard." She wasn't calling Arch's chest flat. Clothing for adventures, which made generous use of treated leather, provided good defense. The pieces covering Arch's chest and abdomen were particularly tough. That's what the little girl had jumped into. She probably felt like she'd been crushed. "Are you okay?" Arch caressed her face and patted her head. "Yep, I am okay, Arch." The little girl grinned, and Arch smiled at her younger sister. "I'll take my leave." Arch nodded at the butler as he withdrew to give them space, and then she ruffled her sister's hair. Running might not having said that much," she hesitated. It was absolutely improper for a noble's daughter to run down the hall, but as she had told her father, they weren't nobles anymore. Wasn't it fine to let her run around then? Arch's hand hadn't stopped moving during that time. The little girl, getting her hair messed up, erupted in carefree giggles. Arch looked around and saw that the other one wasn't there. "Where's Cood in our room?" "Oh yeah, there is something I want to talk to you guys about. Let's go find her." "Okay." Her smile is so cheerful, it's my job to protect it. With that strong sense of mission, Arch took her sister's hand. She could feel the warmth of the little hand completely surrounded by her own. "Your hands are hard, Arch." Arch looked at her free hand. Cut numerous times during adventures and calloused, they were no longer the hands of a daughter of a noble family. She didn't regret it though. Her hands were proof of her time with her friend's foresight. "But I love them." Arch smiled as her sister squeezed her hand. "Thanks." The imperial capital's northern market was bustling with activity as usual. But since most of the shoppers who came here weren't ordinary folk, the crowd wasn't jam-packed like the central market. Here it was possible to walk along the rows of stalls and browse without bumping into people. Hecarim and Robadick arrived and began strolling around, relaxed in the familiar atmosphere. They could be so easygoing, as if the words on guard had been erased from their dictionary. There were few pickpockets or robbers. It was possibly the safest place in the whole safe capital. "So Hecarim, what are we going to buy?" "First, healing items. I am aiming for slight cure wounds wands or maybe middle cure wounds wands, but not if they have only half their uses left. Since we were going to a tomb, we might end up using them on undead too. Besides those, we'll want basic undead countermeasures. We need items that will work against poison and disease. If possible, I'd like to make sure we have stuff that will work against negative energy and incorporeal undead too. Items with permanent enchantment are expensive, so any scrolls with the right magic will do fine. Wands contained multiple uses of a spell, so the rate per cast ended up cheaper than single-use scrolls. It was possible to save money by buying wands of commonly used spells, like ones to heal wounds. Is that so? I thought maybe you were here to buy a gift, and that you invited me to get my opinion. A gift? Never mind, Hecarim, let us find those bargains, right? The shops at this open-air market carried a lot of shabby-looking items. Most of the stalls were a single thin board as a display table. Each stall had only one thing on it. Almost nothing was new. They were mainly scruffy, worn-out, second-hand items. The keepers of these shops seemed fairly capable themselves, for the most part. With thick biceps or the look of a magic caster, these sellers seemed like they would be better at battle than setting prices or haggling. At first glance, it appeared security guards were manning the shops, but they really were the shopkeepers for this one day only. Normally, they made their livings as adventurers or workers. In other words, they were in the same line of work as Hecarim and Robodick. They were selling things they had been using, or items they had discovered on their adventures, but which wouldn't be used by someone on their team stuff they didn't need. Finding a buyer themselves was better for both sellers and buyers. This was instead of selling to a merchant who specialized in magic items or the Wizards Guild, since there wasn't a broker fee. The small fee paid to the Commerce Guild to set up shop was worth it. That's why most workers and adventurers like Hecarim and his friends tended to come here first. Some people even showed up daily during their stay at the capital to hunt for deals. It was also the reason there was virtually no crime in the northern market. Who would willingly attempt to prey on shopkeepers specialized in combat? They would deserve whatever awful things happened to them. After looking around for a little while, Hecarim and Robodick's faces weren't grim, but they weren't cheerful either. Nothing, huh? Nothing. The items on sale were ones their owners didn't need, so naturally Hecarim and his team didn't need most of them either. If they had been lower-rank adventurers or green workers, they might have bought some things. Unfortunately, there was nothing they wanted, even with the needs of their two other teammates in mind. That's too bad. Maybe it would have been faster to buy things normally. Well, we came hoping for deals. We can help it if there aren't any. This sort of persistent frugality is step one of saving money, you know. Saving money, what do you think will happen, Hecarim? I'd be a super elite caster if I knew what you were talking about just from that arch, right? See, you know. Well, I was kinda able to guess from the thread of our conversation, so you know what I am trying to say then, right? You mean that this might be our last adventure? Please don't say it in such a depressing way. Robodick winced. But I suppose you ray not far off. Arch was talking about taking in her little sisters. If that happens, it won't be very easy for her to go adventuring. Yeah, guess not. She'll have to pick up a trade or find some job where she can make money without traveling. I am sure she'll find a job fast enough. She is a caster who can use tier 3 spells. I don't know how many little sisters she has, but she should be able to support a family of 3 or 4. Yes, most likely. She wouldn't offer to take them in if she didn't have the means. So then we ray the ones with the problem. If our wizard leaves the team, what will we do to get a new member? Wonder if there are any free tier 3 arcane casters around. Please save the dreams for bedtime. If we were adventurers, we could have the guild find someone for us. But looking on our own will mainly come down to luck. The pair looked at each other and sighed in unison. The death of a friend, being unable to keep up, or being more capable than the rest of the team, those were the types of reasons adventurers and workers quit their teams. It certainly wasn't an uncommon occurrence. On the contrary, being with the same team for one's entire career was quite rare. Most people switched 2 or 3 times. That went for Hecarim, Robodick, and Amina as well. But that was an entirely different issue from whether they would be able to easily find an arcane caster, not to mention one who could use tier 3 spells. We could get someone who can use tier 2 and train them up. Shouldn't that be our last resort? I'd rather not train someone if we can help it. Poaching someone would be tricky. So many workers are morally bankrupt to begin with. We really need to be careful who we team up with. No combat maniacs or whatnot. In that sense, our team is kind of a miracle. The unusual case of a team that came together simply because we all just wanted money. Well, I guess we found out about Arch's issues after the fact, so not quite. Miss Arch showed up right as we were trying to figure out what to do about our final member. Robodick was looking off into the distance. Hecarim figured his eyes must have been doing the same thing. I even remember what I was drinking that day. Her appearance was so timely it made me think that perhaps the gods formed our team. Really? Wow, I don't remember it as well as you, Robber. What were you drinking? Water. That is what you always drink. You basically never touch the hard stuff. I'd hate it if you drank as much as Amina, but Amina sure is a handful when she's drunk. Anyhow, it's not my fault I can stomach it. Well, yeah, you turn red, then blue, and then white from just one glass. I wonder how it would have been if you hadn't protected yourself against poison the first time you drank. Maybe you'd have a different teammate standing here instead of me. Some people die from alcohol, you know. Robert shrugged. Let's get back to the topic at hand. What should we do if Arch leaves? Is there a chance we disband? If we can find another member, that be our only choice. It is too dangerous to take jobs with only 3 of us. Maybe we could go back to being adventurers. I absolutely refuse to follow the Shrine's rules when all I want to do is save people. If it came to that, I would just retire. Retire? That wouldn't be so bad either. I have some money saved up.